live performance as a drafting process.
Yes, that actually feeds into drafting the writing, because I personally take both seriously, the writing and the performing of my poetry. So I include the audience in both processes. So I would usually share a draft and then go home and re-edit. And it's not necessarily about pleasing the audience, but it's about considering that without the audience there is no work, there is no poetry. The audience engagement is what enhances it. It goes beyond, it goes beyond us. It's this larger, realization that it's our voice, but it speaks to many other people who are going through the same thing, or who will resonate with the work. So.
And audiences, with the work that we do as performance poets, or poets who perform our work, whatever we might decide at that moment to call ourselves. I've been finding with these interviews that identity of what we are is a massive thing. I'm not even sure I can be bothered to talk about it any longer. It's this whole kind of thing is like, well, are we spoken word artists or poets, or does it even matter? We're just people doing words. I think that might be enough.
Yeah.
But audiences, I mean, one thing I'm really interested in is this invisible energy that exists, which I think is quite a creative energy, quite an electric energy that exists in a room full of people. Any reflections on that?
Yeah, there is something about sharing your work with an audience and just, having them resonate with it. I mean, I remember when I wrote a poem about Mr. Def and how I felt about his retirement.
It's a great poem.
Thank you.
Do you know what? I value your answer so much, I'm going to turn on this light. Simultaneously knocking over the camera.
It's a crime of photo.
Yeah! She comes to life!
I need this attached to my phone for Instagram. But, yeah, so... For example, that kind of poem, I would share it with an audience that I would probably think, know nothing about hip-hop. And the kind of stories I would hear back, there was someone that came up to me and she was like, I don't really listen to, hip-hop, but did you know that my mum actually once worked with Mr. Def? Just really random things, and I would travel to another country and people go, this actually happened, this is how I connect with your poem. And it's really interesting to hear different ways people connect with your work. There's just something magical about it. And there's just an energy of just hearing the words just bouncing off, kind of weirdly, the skins of the audiences. I don't know how to describe it.
Bouncing off the skins?
Yes, in a weird way, but just
just getting written down.
That's true, copyright maybe. But there's just this energy of, you've been writing something in your room for maybe months, and it then interacts with an audience, then interacts with human beings, and that's how the world works: interacting, being in conversation, having relationships. And performing is kind of forging a relationship with sometimes strangers, which is kind of weird, but it's how the world works, it's how humanity works in general. So for me, performing is just really building relationships with words.
Profound. Somebody, you could have a scribe walking around like me. I'm your scribe. Here I am. I was at a Cat Francois stage show called Raising Lazarus, where she goes in.
I saw that. Yes.
Goes into her history in Trinidad, I believe, and looks at it, and she goes back and tells a story about how she goes back and meets all of her family over the generations. And she was showing some family photographs, and then some guy in the audience said, "Yeah, that's my mum," or "That's my auntie," or something. And she worked out, and then she started having a conversation with him mid-show, and worked out that they were related.
Wow.
And we were just sat there going, what is going on? What do you think these spaces give to society? Maybe nothing at all. Maybe that's the value that you just sort of sit and listen to some words.
Maybe nothing at all. It's just another way of, sharing an experience, and that's always what we're trying to do, whether it's a painting, whether it's a film, whether it's a play, it's all about sharing a story and sharing experiences, and people always want to feel like their story is being told, or that they can relate to somebody. We always like to feel like we can see ourselves on TV, we can hear ourselves in a poem, and that's just the same thing that performing does in terms of sharing it with an audience and feeling like it's valued, in terms of someone values that experience that you're sharing, someone relates to it, and someone is heard in your voice. It's not just you. That experience becomes someone else's. Someone else also exists in your experience in a way. So it's valued because you're making someone else visible as well, not just yourself. And
when you say somebody else, maybe somebody in your story, or the listener?
Both, the listener as well. So, for example, saying about the woman who approached me and saying that her mum had worked with, was that for her was something that she didn't think was, she never really said. Like, it's just like, oh, my mum just. But for her, in that, she was like really excited. Like, what are the chances that I'm at a poetry show and hearing someone talking about Miss Steph? So in that moment, she is, her mum is kind of like visible in my story in a weird way.
I see you mean. I mean, it's analogous to the Raising Lazarus story of Cat Francois, because it's like, we have shared history.
So it's
and I are walking the same path.
Yeah. So it's no longer just Cat's show or experience. It's also that audience member. They now exist in that story, and they're aware of that, which is quite beautiful.
And I exist in a small way. I wasn't related to anybody. I didn't really say anything, but I was there.
Sure. Maybe the new version, she puts like a picture of your family member. So yeah.
I have a Mos Def claim to fame. I had a gig. I was giving a talk, and then I did a poem at the end. And Mos Def came up to me afterwards and said something like, "That was awesome, well done," and gave me a hug.
Wow.
And because I'm not very cool, and I didn't know who he was, and it just totally went over my head, and somebody came up and said, "You realise that was Mos Def?" I was like,
wow.
I should have known that. If only to say, can I quote on that? And,
he seems to be showing up everywhere with everyone else apart from me, which is quite heartbreaking.
It's a really good poem. I do like that Mos Def poem that you've got.
Thank you.